oozes. So after about a month or 2 months of this, we went to see the police and said, there's a real problem. There's a gun culture starting, and guns are going to replace trainers. And the chief of the vice squad said, who's Mike Pickering? We said, pardon? Who's Mike Pickering? One of our DJs. And apparently ACPO had just started a rave division, and they discovered that the words Mike and Pickering appeared on 77% of all rave flyers. So for 2 hours we went on saying, there's a problem, there's a gang problem. At the end of it we said, we work in America a lot and we work around the world, and we work in clubs where the local police, like in New York, come and work on the door, and we'd like you to work on the door with us, we'll pay you. And they said, we don't do that. We said, yes you do football matches. And they said, that's different. How is it different? It's just different. And that was the sheer and utter stupidity of the Greater Manchester Police back in those days, when they tried to shut us down twice. First time we got away, thanks to Sir George Carman QC, who spotted very early on that the first thing to do was for me to shut my face. And all my partners went, we knew it was your fault. And Carman had spotted, just from reading the papers on the train from Euston, that Greater Manchester Police had decided that me talking about this great new culture was promoting the sales of drugs. And then secondly, he pointed out that we will survive and you will keep your club because I have just read the letter from the leader of your council and from your Lord Mayor, and I have never seen such positive letters, which is why I say our city fathers are so brilliant. They understood the role that the club was playing in the beginning of rebuilding their city. So we beat them then. The second time round, we were told we were being shot again, this is in the mid-90s, because we had failed to do what the police had told us to do, which was to remove a man called Damien Noonan, one of our dearly departed doormen, as head of our door. And this time the council replied by saying, there's nothing we can do to help you because you have disobeyed a police order.
It was time to destroy the hacienda. Eventually it would be turned into a block of luxury designer apartments that became a banal part of a regenerated city that the club itself had inspired. Another joke for Wilson to relish. He was, after all, the man who claimed he brought loft living to Manchester. Architect Ben Kelly.
It had run its course, and I think when something has run its course, the best thing you can do is to face the reality and call it a day and say goodbye to it, and it was fantastic. And I think that was a very brave thing to do, a very difficult thing to do, a very emotional thing to do. So what are you going to do? Turn it into a museum? Let somebody else take it on and do something horrific? So from that point of view, I was perfectly happy that they should bring in the wrecking ball and say goodbye.
The theme of this northern story is as much about death as it is about life, and a second member of the original factory board, Rob Gretton, died in 1998.
It was very, very sad for all the members of a certain ratio, because Rob sort of found us, introduced us to Tony, and then when we left factory, Rob helped us out again. So Rob Gretton was always there for us. Now, I know for a fact, you know, Tony and Rob were very, very close.
Wilson attempted new versions of factory records, endlessly curious for the next new thing, the next pop culture revolution, the next dangerous movement, but he never managed to follow his great innovations, Factory, the Hacienda, So It Goes. The history he had written for himself, as audacious post-punk saviour of Manchester, was too powerful to improve upon. Wilson's place in pop counterculture history was ensured when comedian Steve Coogan played him as pompous, tricky, bullying buffoon in Michael Winterbottom's far-fetched 2002 recreation of the history of Factory, 24-Hour Party People. Typically, Wilson gamely accepted his role as irritating fall guy and got the joke more than anyone when the film's marketing summed up many people's attitudes towards him.
I got home that night and said to my partner Yvette, I said, it's great, there's 3 posters. One's got a picture of the actor playing Ian, it says genius. One's the actor playing Sean, it says poet. And one's a picture of me, and it says, and Yvette went, twat. It's like, how did you? So anyway, and I did that to about 3 of my friends, and they all did the same thing. They all said twat before I could tell them. So that would explain what my friends think of me. I am an arrogant twat, and I'm also a TV presenter in my hometown, and blah, blah, blah. So for around 30 years, people have treated me with contempt. Quite rightly, I'm a TV presenter, I'm a big Ed, fuck you, Wilson.
Wilson's impact on his beloved Manchester over the past 35 years is undeniable. As infuriating local celebrity, as factory genius, as a kind of commissioning editor hiring troublesome but inspired talent, as generous tyrant, as down-to-earth intellectual. Manchester has made it into the future as an international city admired for its radical, enterprising energy directly because of Wilson. Manchester City Councillor Sir Richard Leese.
What they all did is that they brought people to areas of the city that they wouldn't previously have come to, and particularly people with disposable income, people who were looking to move the city forward. And I think that's the real strength of what Tony did in those sorts of areas, that he created a life where there'd not been life previously.
This was a city of half bricks, and half bricks means old, they're either bomb sites or sites that look like bomb sites because the buildings have collapsed. And in the mid-70s, that was all there was in Manchester. Every other building was a piece of waste ground. It was like a mouthful of rotten teeth. Every other tooth was just about standing, a little bit rusty. Every other tooth was a cavernous hole. And suddenly, every little bit of those holes has been filled in with apartment blocks, people living here. And I do like to think that it began in Manchester before. I know it's happening in Newcastle, in Glasgow, in Liverpool, all over Britain now. This was the city it really began in, initially because of the music culture. And I don't think we should take all the credit for the music culture, but certainly this all began 10, 15 years before the property developers, and it began with the musicians. And it was really our city fathers, who are brighter than most city fathers, in my opinion, who understood instinctively, 15 years before Richard Florida ever wrote the book on the creative industries, Creating Regeneration, they understood that if all the kids in their town thought that their city, and this is 1980-81, if they thought their city wasn't just as good as Birmingham or as good as Cardiff, but their city was better than Paris, Tokyo or New York, then that was something to build on. And they built on it, and they're still building on it.
To some extent, even if he did say so himself, Wilson, shaping history around his own concerns, his own devastating self-confidence, regenerated a declining city, both economically and culturally, basing his revolution on the abstract power and beauty of music. Here's Yvette Livesey.
Post-factory, he had FAC 2, FAC 3 and FAC 4. And Tony's passion for signing bands was always, he always wanted to remain in the music industry and kept coming across these fabulous bands and trying to find vehicles. And I always found it very strange that the people in the music industry that destroyed Tony and actively destroyed it, and the rest of the industry stood by while they watched him being destroyed. It was totally unnecessary at the time, because actually they were busy trying to sign Oasis and Pulp at the time, and if those people at London Records had had more foresight, they wouldn't have put Factory down, they would have kept it going and understood what value Tony could have brought to them, but they didn't see it. But also, I mean, the other things we were doing together, we worked very hard on devolution. I'm very much a Tory and right-wing, and Tony's very much a socialist and left-wing. But between the two of us, we both believed in exactly the same things, because if you're a moral person, you just do. The other things we were working on as well for the last 3 years of Tony's life, his absolute passion and mine, was working in regeneration, particularly up in East Lancashire. And as one of the pathfinders in Britain, there are 9 across Britain, the people who ran the one in East Lancashire realised that while you're redeveloping the housing stock, you also have to look at the culture and what's behind why people don't want to live in that region, and also encouraging people to want to stay in that region. So they employed us really just to look at the cultural aspect.
At the end of 2006, Wilson discovered he had cancer.
We were in New York, and he was sort of getting tired towards the end of the day and didn't want to go out, didn't want to do stuff, and that wasn't Tony at all. And then we came home, and he just sort of looked like he'd got really bad flu, and it just went worse and worse and worse. So that was it really, that was the beginning. Went to the doctors, and he got a lung full of fluid, and they took him in immediately and found out what it was. And then the day after Christmas, they operated on him as soon as possible. So he had very aggressive kidney cancer.
I got my first month free, which is part of the deal, but from next month, it's £3 grand a month. but